The galaxy had rules, unspoken but unbreakable. The most important of them all was simple: never cross into human space. No one could say for sure when the rule was first spoken, but everyone knew the stories. Traders swore that ships which wandered past the invisible border never returned. Military captains claimed they had seen fleets vanish without a trace. Scientists had theories about strange energy zones and hidden weapons, but those who went to study the area never came back. For generations, the warning stood like a shadow across the stars, shaping maps and detours, deciding where war and peace could happen, but to Commander Zero of the Vrali's dominion. The warning sounded like superstition, an old fear kept alive by those too timid to challenge it. Humans, in his view, were not legends. They were just another young, aggressive species who had risen to the stars a few centuries ago. They had fought some wars, won a few, lost a few. They were not gods. They were not ghosts. The idea that they could simply erase entire fleets was absurd. Yet the border of their claimed space was treated like it was carved into the bones of the galaxy itself. No patrol ships guarded it. No beacons marked it. It was simply there. A line on every star chart that no sane pilot would cross. Zorak did not see bravery in avoiding that line. He saw weakness. He had come here with his flagship, the Iron Talon, to prove that the galaxy's greatest superstition was nothing but a myth. The crew was nervous, though they tried not to show it. Conversations on the bridge were short, eyes flicking toward sensor screens as if expecting danger to appear at any second. Even his second-in-command, Krellis, could not hide her unease. "We are 3 light minutes from the human border," she said quietly. "Sensors are clear." "Of course they are," Zorak replied, his voice calm but edged with challenge. "You think the humans have magic walls? That their ships hide in the darkness, waiting forever?" Krellis did not answer. She kept her eyes on the data, her fingers tapping the console as if touch could keep the reading stable. The crew had heard the stories since they were children's ships simply vanishing mid-transmission. Static hiss where voices had been. Sensor records ending abruptly as if the universe itself had swallowed the signal. But they had also heard of human ships appearing unexpectedly in far-off systems, destroying targets with surgical precision, and vanishing without pursuit. The Iron Talon crossed the invisible border with no fanfare. No alarms, no sudden flashes of light. One moment they were in safe space, the next they were in the forbidden zone. Zorak allowed himself a small smile. "See? The galaxy fears shadows." But then the stars began to change. At first it was subtle. The colors seemed flatter. Some constellations did not match their charts. A faint haze crept across the black, as though space itself had a thin mist. The sensors reported no anomalies, no radiation spikes, no gravity distortions, but several systems flickered briefly before recovering. Krellis frowned. "Navigation's acting strange." "It's recalibrating itself without input. Run a full systems check," Zorak ordered, his tone still calm, but his mind beginning to note the oddities. "Probably interference. It's nothing unusual for deep space." Before Krellis could reply, the comms officer turned sharply toward them, his face pale. "Sir, I'm receiving a transmission." Zorak raised a brow. "From where?" The officer swallowed. "From everywhere. All channels at once." The bridge went silent as the sound came through, clear, strong, and unmistakably human. The voice was calm, male, and spoke in perfect standard galactic. "You've made a mistake." There was no source, no coordinates. The signal was not traveling through space. It was simply there, as if it had been in the air the whole time, waiting to be heard. Zorak's smile faded. "Reply," he ordered. "I can't," the comms officer said, his voice tight. "Our signal is being reflected back. We can't transmit past our own hull." On the main display, the haze grew thicker, the stars dimmer. The sensor officer reported that long-range scans now showed nothing, no nearby stars, no planetary systems. It was as if they had entered a hollow, empty sphere where light itself was afraid to exist. Krellis leaned toward Zorak, her voice low. We should turn back. Zorak was about to respond when the comms officer's panel lit up again another transmission. The same voice. You are in violation. You should not be here. This time, the voice had no trace of emotion. It was not angry. It was not threatening. It was simply stating a fact. Locate the source, Zorak ordered sharply. We can't, came the reply. It's not coming from a ship. It's everywhere at once. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The bridge lights seemed dimmer. Now, though no one had changed the settings, the air felt heavier, the silence between words stretching longer. The haze outside had thickened until even the nearest stars were no more than faint dying sparks. Zorak kept his voice firm. Set a return course. We'll collect what data we can and leave. That should be enough to prove this zone isn't dangerous. But when the navigator attempted to plot a course, the system froze. The path they had taken in was gone. The coordinates no longer existed in their maps. It's not possible, the navigator whispered. It's like the border was never there. It's neither is the way back. The voice returned a third time, still calm. You cannot leave. For the first time, Zorak felt a chill. The iron talon floated in a silence so deep it felt alive. No hum of distant cosmic noise, no faint pings from nearby stars. Only the low thrum of the ship's own engines, steady but small, as if even they were afraid to disturb whatever was. Out there, Commander Zorak stood rigid at the center of the bridge, his gaze locked on the viewing screen. The haze outside had swallowed almost everything now, an endless gray void where the stars should have been. He felt a strange pull in his chest, like a pressure without weight, as though the space around them was subtly bending. Helm, rotate. The ship, he ordered. Full sweep. Let's see if the path is still there from another angle. The pilot nodded and executed the maneuver. The iron talon pivoted slowly, engines murmuring, but every direction was the same. The border they had crossed was going to no familiar constellations, no recognizable markers, nothing but the endless gray. It's like we've been. Moved, Crelly said quietly. Zorak's eyes narrowed. Moved where? The navigator shook. His head. Our position doesn't register on any map. Coordinates are not real. They exist in the system. But when you try to calculate distances, they collapse into nothing. Collapsing coordinates, Zorak repeated. That's impossible, it is, the navigator said. But it's happening. Before Zorak could respond, the comms panel lit up again. The same human voice spoke, smooth and controlled. You should not have entered. Now you cannot leave. Zorak's voice was cold. Identify yourself. No reply came. The lights on the comms board blinked once, then died completely. Same moment, every display on the bridge flickered. Sensor readings shifted wildly, temperature dropping. Gravity readings spiking and falling again, as if the laws of physics were rewriting themselves moment to moment. Then, without warning, a shadow appeared in the void. It wasn't a ship. At least it didn't look like one. It had no visible engines, no hull plating, no lights. It was a jagged silhouette, its edges shifting as though it was both solid and not solid at the same time. The iron talon's sensors struggled to lock onto it. Giving 3 different size estimates, in less than a second one reading claimed it was smaller than a shuttle. Another said it was the size of a moon. The crew stared in silence. Even the air felt heavier now, every breath slightly harder to take. Power up weapons, Zorak said, his tone steady. The weapons officer hesitated. Sir, our targeting systems can't lock on. It's like it's not here. Then, we fire manually. Before the order could be carried out, the shadow shifted again closer, this time. There had been no movement, no thrust, no visible sign of travel, but now it hung in space, only a few hundred meters away. Its surface, or whatever passed for one, was entirely black, absorbing every scrap of light. And yet, something about it felt like it was looking at them. Krellis's voice was tight. Commander, I think it's the source of the voice. As if on cue, the comms came alive again. This time the voice was closer, as though it were being spoken directly into their minds. You entered human space without permission. No one. Does that, no one leaves. Zorak clenched his jaw. We are explorers. We came for information, not conflict. Explorers do not ignore warnings, the voice replied. Zorak opened his mouth to answer, but the shadow pulsed. Not with light, but with absence, and even deeper darkness rippled across its surface. A moment later, alarms blared across the bridge, shields failing. The defense officer shouted, "We're losing power across all decks." "Compensate," Zorak barked. "I can't, whatever it's doing. It's draining our systems directly. It's bypassing our power core." The shadow pulsed again, and then a second one appeared. This one was even closer. Krellis turned toward Zorak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, if these things are human ships, we're not dealing with technology we understand." Zorak stared at the void outside, the haze, the impossible shadows. For the first time, he wondered if the galaxy's stories hadn't been exaggerated at all, if perhaps they'd been watered down to hide just how terrifying the truth really was. And then the voice returned, low and final. "You have one choice. Surrender your vessel or vanish." The silence stretched for too long, pressing down on the crew of the Iron Talon like an invisible weight. Commander Zorak's fingers tightened on the armrest of his command chair, his mind racing. Surrender was not an option, but neither was blind resistance. Whatever these entities were, if they were even ships, they operated on a level of power and control that defied everything his people knew about spacefaring warfare. The shadow shapes outside did not drift or move in any recognizable way. They simply were, and the space around them seemed to bend, as if reality itself didn't want to touch them. Every few seconds, the ship's lights dimmed, as though the Iron Talon's energy was being quietly bled away. "Commander Krellis," said her voice tight, "if we don't act soon, we'll lose life support entirely." Zorak kept his eyes on the viewing screen. "If we fire in their real ships, we start a war we can't win. If we don't, we die anyway." The voice returned, deep and unwavering. "This is not a negotiation. Choose something in." Zorak snapped. "We don't bow to threats," he said, his voice cold enough to frost metal. "Weapons charge everything we've got. Let's target the nearest one." The weapons officer hesitated for just a moment, long enough to make Zorak's gaze sharpen, then began the manual targeting sequence. No sensors, no autolock. Just raw aim and gut instinct. The hum of the main plasma cannon built in the air, a low vibration that rattled through the deck. The moment it reached full power, Zorak gave the order. The blast tore through the void. Like a spear of blue fire, it hit the nearest shadow dead center, and passed straight through it, as if it were smoke. But the effect was immediate. The second shadow shifted, its edges twisting unnaturally, and suddenly the Iron Talon's system screamed with new alarms. Hull integrity was dropping in multiple sectors, not from an explosion, not from a beam. The metal was disappearing. "It's erasing parts of the ship," Krellis shouted. Zorak's blood ran cold. This was no weapon in the conventional sense. It was reality itself being rewritten. Then something even more terrifying happened. The viewing screen flickered, not from damage, but from interference. When it stabilized, the bridge crew saw not the void, not the shadows, but the face of a human, a man mid-aged, with sharp, calculating eyes. He spoke calmly, as though discussing the weather. "You came here thinking the warnings were fear. They were mercy. You have seconds left. Use them." And then, without waiting for a reply, the image vanished, and so did the shadows. For one breathless moment, the void was empty again. No haze, no bending space. Stars returned outside the window. Carriella's turned slowly to Zorak. "What just happened? Did they let us go?" Zorak didn't answer immediately. His mind was already turning over the man's words. "You have seconds left." The ship's sensors suddenly lit up, hundreds of signals closing in at impossible speeds. All human, armed. The Iron Talon's bridge was silent, except for the sharp, urgent beeps of the sensors. The display was a storm of red dots, each representing an incoming contact. hundreds of them, closing in so fast it felt like they were folding space itself. To arrive, Crelly's throat was dry. "Commander, those are human signatures. But the power readings," she broke off, shaking her head. "They're beyond anything we've ever recorded." Zorak's mandibles tightened. "Put them on the main screen." The viewing panel shifted, and the darkness of space lit up with sudden, impossible light. First came a shimmer, like a heat, haze rippling across the void. Then, one by one, massive warships emerged, not from hyperspace. Not from any jump corridor the Vral Empire understood, but simply appearing as if they'd been there all along, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. The lead vessel dwarfed even the largest carriers in Zorak's fleet. Its hull was a smooth, seamless black, broken only by faint lines of red light that pulsed like a heartbeat. No visible weapons, no engine exhaust. Yet every instinct in Zorak's body screamed that it could obliterate the Iron Talon in an instant. Then the comms channel opened without request. The same human voice from before spoke, steady and controlled. "You have entered a protected zone. You ignored the warning. Your presence ends here." Zorak forced his voice to remain calm. "It came for exploration." "We sought knowledge," the human interrupted. "It came for conquest. We've seen it before. Every trespasser believes they will be the exception. They never are." The fleet behind the lead ship began to shift formation. No rush, no aggression, just quiet, precise positioning, like predators surrounding prey. A low vibration rolled through the Iron Talon's hull. First Zorak thought it was weapons fire, but then he realized nothing was hitting them. Instead, the human fleet was projecting something in an energy field that wrapped around his ship, tightening with every second. Shields collapsing. Crelly's called out. "They're not even targeting our systems, they're pulling power from our reactor directly." On the screen, the lead human vessel's red lines brightened. The voice came again. "The Vral Empire will remember this moment as your last in the Forbidden Zone. Do not send others." Zorak clenched his fists, but there was no path forward. Every escape route was blocked. Weapons would do nothing. Even surrender seemed meaningless. And then, just as suddenly as they'd come, the human fleet began to fade. Not into hyperspace, but into nothing. The ships dissolved into streaks of light, leaving only the lead vessel, which drifted closer until it filled the entire viewing screen. The human face appeared once more. His eyes locked on Zorak's. "We don't erase your people to win. We erase them to protect the rest." Before Zorak could reply, the Iron Talon systems shut down completely. Every light went out. Every console died. In the cold darkness, they drifted, powerless, and utterly at the mercy of their hunters. The Iron Talon hung lifeless in the void. Its once bright engine trails now cold, its proud war banners invisible against the darkness. Inside, the crew moved like ghosts. Voices hushed as if the silence itself might be listening. Zorak sat in the command chair, staring at the black wall of the main screen. Somewhere beyond it, the human ship waited, patient, unhurried, like a predator that already knew the outcome. He could still feel that gaze, those human eyes from the transmission, drilling into him long after the image had vanished. Then the screen came alive again. No stars, no space, just the human face, sharp and clear. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "You trespassed. You were warned. You will not leave this place as you arrived." Zorak forced himself to speak. "If you mean to destroy us, then do it. We will meet our end as warriors." The human tilted his head slightly as if weighing something. "No, death is quick. Death teaches nothing." Without warning, a pulse of crimson light rippled through the Iron Talon. It wasn't a weapon strike. It passed through the hull like it wasn't even there, through armor, through flesh, through the crew's very minds. Zorak gasped as images flooded his vision worlds, burning, fleets collapsing, 1,000 invasions crushed before they could begin. And always, in the center of it all, human warships, silent and unrelenting, dismantling entire armadas with precision and speed no other race could match. Every trespasser, every challenger, Every empire that thought humans were weak. Goncrellis fell to her knees, clutching her head. They've been here all along, she whispered, watching us, waiting. The humans spoke again. We protect our borders, because we must. This zone is not empty, it holds things your kind is not ready to see. Cross the line again, and your homeworld will share the fate of those who thought they could take what is not theirs. The images faded. The crew blinked, dazed and shaking, as if they'd each lived a lifetime in the space of seconds. Then, without another word, the human ship began to turn away. It didn't accelerate, it simply vanished as if erased from reality. And in its absence, the Iron Talon systems roared back to life. Zorak sat frozen. He knew what had happened wasn't just a threat. It was a sentence suspended in midair, waiting for a single wrong step to fall. When he finally gave the order to leave the Forbidden Zone, his voice was quiet, stripped of the arrogance he had carried in. The Iron Talon limped home in silence. No one spoke of what they had seen, not to the council, not to their own families. The crew's eyes were haunted, as if some part of them had been left behind in the Forbidden Zone. Even the hum of the ship's core felt subdued, as though the vessel itself feared drawing attention. When they reached Krelith Prime, the council demanded answers. Zorak stood before them, the proud warlord now pale and slow to meet their gaze. We crossed the border, he admitted. We met them. One counselor leaned forward. Them, Zorak's jaw tightened. Humans. A ripple of disbelief passed through the chamber. Some laughed, others scoffed. The younger strategists rolled their eyes at what they assumed was a coward's excuse for retreat. But the veterans in the room, they did not laugh. They had heard the old whispers, the stories from before the Great Silence. When explorers vanished into human space and never returned, those who had returned, like Zorak, spoke with the same quiet dread. When the council pressed for detail, ship size, weapon systems, weakness, Zorak gave none. It doesn't matter. They see us before we see them. They know our moves before we make them. You cannot fight what they are. The meeting ended without resolution. Official records labeled the Iron Talon's incursion as an unsuccessful recon due to unknown environmental interference. The truth was buried under bureaucracy, but the truth didn't stay buried for long. Crew members began leaving the fleet. Some vanished into remote colonies. Others drank themselves into oblivion. And in the taverns of distant stations, the story spread not in reports, not in public declarations, but in whispers. They said the human ship hadn't just defeated the Iron Talon, it had let them go. That it was only a message, that the next trespasser wouldn't be so lucky. Weeks later, in a distant quadrant, a smuggler claimed he'd seen it, a dark, angular shape drifting without light, watching from the void. He'd turned back before, crossing the invisible border, and he'd sworn the ship moved without moving, as if space itself carried it. And so the Forbidden Zone grew, not by decree, but by fear. Star maps began to mark it, not with warnings from any council, but with the same simple words traders had used for centuries. Human space, do not enter. By then, no one questioned whether the Iron Talon's story was true. They only asked one thing: if humans were still watching? And the chilling answer, whispered in quiet corners, was always the same: they never stopped.